constant effort this year is to really figure out a way to overcome that and to try and find ways to objectively feel confident in my own work enough to say that I know I've done everything I can. The books are as good as they can be, and there's an audience out there for them. And it's worth me investing the time and money to learn ads to make them sell. And that isn't about learning the ads platform. That is about overcoming the obstacles of lack of self-belief.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show we have...
Matilda Swift.
Yes, we do. I love that name, Matilda.
Yeah, it's so cute. We talk about her name.
Yes, we do.
Matilda writes cozy mystery, and we talk about finding your genre and overcoming self-doubt, not just about cozies, obviously. Another thing we talked about that was very interesting is sometimes releasing more books isn't always the pathway to success, and how she kind of stepped back and reassessed everything after she'd written several books and then restarted. So that's coming up. It's really good.
It is. It is. Yeah. So what's been going on with you?
I have been trying to take things off my plate because I did that 5 phases of the business thing with Becca. And so I just had a meeting with her the other day, and I'm going to outsource my inbox and get rid of that. Wow. Yeah, because it's taking more and more time. When I first started publishing, I was like, I don't know why these people talk about email is so overwhelming. It's like, this is not that bad. And now I'm to the point that I'm like, this is taking several hours every day, which is not good, you know?
That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've got a plan for that now, and doing basically getting things lined up so that I can get rid of them. And then in January, hopefully have more time. Yeah. And I'm doing some fun stuff too. I think it was spring, I asked my readers if they had any recipes they wanted to share. And so I'm putting together a cookbook that I'm going to send out in the newsletter it's just like the reader cookbook, things that people have recommended. And so I've been putting that together, and I'm really, really hungry right now.
Yeah.
The cookbook. And of course, it's like all scones and white chocolate chip cookies and lots of bread. So anyway, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
What about you?
I've been sick or under the weather, not sick. I've just had allergies so bad, but I think the allergies may be developing into something else. So I'm just kind of doing some Christmas stuff and talking about writing, all the stuff we do, and getting ready for Christmas. My house looks like Santa's workshop threw up in here, but I want it to look that way. I want my grandkids, when they walk in, I just want them to be,
they're in the Christmas wonderland.
In a wonderland. And so that requires a lot of my effort, but I enjoy it, and I love that part of Christmas. And so, yes, that's what we're doing, and not much else right now.
Okay. Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, we should get on with the interview because it's fantastic.
It is. It's very good. It's very good.
All right. So here is Matilda.
Yep.
Well, today we are really excited to have Matilda Swift with us. How are you, Matilda?
I am great. A little bit cold because in the UK here, suddenly we've got snow and ice, but I love Christmas. So I'm already feeling quite festive.
Oh, well, we're so glad you're here. Stay warm. And as I'm writing your name, I'm thinking, I love that name so much. It is not a name you hear very often, and I love it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a pen name. I have a very distinctive real name that is too unique that I felt like I didn't want to have out there because if you search for it, it's just me. And I thought it gives me a good chance to find the coziest name without being overly twee. It's easier to promote a name that's not you, I find. So I really like having a pen name, and I use it everywhere.
Very good. Very good.
Awesome. I like that idea of having
I do too.
A cozy pen name for a cozy author. I like that.
It's very on brand.
Yeah, I did not think about that when I started. So, all right. So let me read your bio and we'll get started. Matilda Swift lives in a small English town that's just as beautiful, but less eventful than the settings of her mysteries, which is probably a good thing. She's originally from Manchester, and after traveling the world from Madagascar to Malaysia, as well as living in Hong Kong for several years, she's back among the hills and rain in the places she loves best. She's also the co-host of the Pen to Paycheck Authors podcast.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, tell us how you got into writing, Matilda.
I'm one of the people that's always written. So my pen name is from Matilda, the character in the Roald Dahl book, because my very first memory is of being Matilda, which obviously isn't true. I was not a fictional character for a little while, but that's my first memories when I was about 6 years old. I thought I was Matilda, and I've always loved books and writing. So I've always written, but I think my journey to self-publishing was maybe a bit different to other people's. I used to live in Hong Kong, as my bio says, and there's a really great writing community out there. And one of my friends out there is a sci-fi fantasy author, Jordan Rivet. And we went to a writing group together, and she was self-publishing. You know, she was one of the trailblazers 2016. Everyone else was like, what are you doing? That seems crazy. We should all just sit here and write books that no one ever sees apart from our group. And then I used to just try different sorts of genres and bring different things. And one day I just wrote the first chapter of what is, you know, pretty similar to the first chapter of my first cozy. And I'd never heard of cozy mysteries before. She's American, and because she was in the self-pub space and she's American, cozies are much bigger in the US. And really here in the UK, people are very excited by Richard Osman books because it's something new and different here. Whereas we all know cozies have been going along for a long time, but I had never heard of the genre name. So she told me about that, and she was really successful by then already. And so I had a great leg up, and it just sounded really exciting. The ability to control your own career and try different things yourself and be really in control. And it's been a lot of fun. And I was able to ask her all the questions that kind of hold you back the first couple of years. So that was great.
It kind of gave you a shortcut in many ways. You didn't have to find out as much on your own. So that's great. Well, what is your definition of success?
I have been thinking about this a lot this year. So I maybe talk a bit more about my publishing journey later, but I took most of this year off because I really wanted to work on mindset things. And I, in fact, spent maybe the first 3 or 4 months this year getting some therapy. And in that, we were talking about general, you know, what's your personal success and what would make you think you're good enough? And I was like, you know, maybe if I won the Nobel Prize, that I'd be good enough. Yeah. And, you know, that was just that was the best question to ask someone who always thinks they should be doing more and being more. Because it made me realize that, yeah, that's not a reasonable point at which you will think you've done enough. And I think that made me also look at my writing career. So to me, you know, I'm someone who's very ambitious, and I've had a very academic past and really attained exactly what I wanted to do in that area. So when I was thinking about self-publishing, in my head, sort of in an unquestioning way, was just enormous goals that had no steps along the way and no realistic sense of how to get there. And anything else was failure. So I've been really working this year on trying to figure out what's maybe my next success. So I'm really just focusing on my next series. And I've also been trying to make myself little steps to success. And one thing I did is I've got a kid's reward chart on my fridge with different financial goals, so daily income goals. And every point along the way, there are, I think, 4 or 5 sections where you get to give yourself a prize. And I've picked prizes. And one of them, I hit my first one recently, and I got to get myself some nail art. So I've got it on today. So you can't see it if anyone's listening. So I got myself some Christmas nail art. I love having my nails done. It felt like such a tangible thing to do, to just say, it's a small goal, the goal that I'd set originally. My big financial reward is to get myself a cat litter robot, because I have no reason to have it, right? It's such an indulgence, but I would love to have it.
I don't even have a cat, but no.
But you would love that. I mean, yeah, I've got 2. And I don't enjoy skipping cat litter, and it's beneath me. You know, I will one day be above all that. But yeah, and so that's been really good this year, is to really focus on what are some specific measurable parts of success. My long-term goal, I would like to be full-time, and that's a big part of the podcast that you mentioned earlier. But I'm really trying to focus on what's the next step rather than what's the big goal.
Excellent. That's so healthy and very smart.
I'm trying.
Yeah, I know. Are we all? Well, what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft when you started?
I mean, partly I wish I had heard about cozy mysteries before, known it was a genre, and been able to read about it before I started writing. I also just wish I had known I was a mystery writer before. As I said, I'd written lots of different books that I brought to this group, and all sorts of different genres. I have a master's in creative writing, so I've started with serious literary fiction that had no plot and I didn't know what to do with it, and various other genres. And then looking back on it, I realized way too late. They all had murders in them. They were all murder mysteries pretending to be something else. And that's also something I've really been working on in terms of mindset, is trying to know myself a bit better and recognize the things that I'm obsessed with. Because I always thought everyone's watching mystery shows all the time. That's a normal thing to do. Everyone's just reading mysteries and everyone's just watching. I think so. I mean, I think it is pretty common, right? Everyone's watched Murder, She Wrote and everyone watched Monk. Yeah. But that is my default. That is a thing that I would always watch. And I'm always, whenever something goes wrong, I'm always thinking, oh, is there some sort of mystery here? Is there a murderer about? And I think not everyone's thinking that way. And I wish I had recognized that about myself earlier. So I'm really trying to get better at recognizing what are my obsessions and how can I foreground them and make more of them.
And how are they unique to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I will tell you, because of my conversations with people, they're not wondering who murdered who and if there's a murderer about.
Or
because,
would this be a good place to hide a dead body? Things like that.
Yeah. That's my first thought. Is like, what murder could happen here? And in fact, I was doing some online dating earlier this year, and I always have a thing when I'm meeting strangers or on a bad date. If I'm having a bad conversation, what I want to get out of it is a murder technique. So if I'm chatting with somebody and I'm bored, I'm like, in your line of work, your specific line of work or your hobby, how would somebody murder someone in an interesting way? And I have absolutely loved that. I've got some really weird stories from that they're not all very cozy, but some of them are.
That's pretty funny.
That is awesome.
I mean, one time I took my grandson to the park, and literally my very first thought from walking into the park, because it was the first time we've been to this one, was, oh my gosh, you could hide a body back there and nobody would find it. Because there was this little wooded area around the side of the park. And I mean, that was my first thought. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's my first thought everywhere I go.
And I don't think that's strange at all. I don't know why you think that's strange, Jamie. Well, I was going to go back to the writing in different things, trying different genres. I've been doing Becca Syme's 5 phases of author business, and I didn't realize this till we went through the different phases. But that's one of the beginning phases: is you experiment a lot, maybe in your writing style or in your genre. And I think that's something that we kind of all have to go through. I think that's very typical, and we just don't realize we're doing it sometimes. I think we're all in that experimental phase.
Yeah, and I definitely feel glad I did it before, so I'm not sat around thinking, should I genre hop now? Because I know I've been narrowing to a point. Yeah. I've not been randomly wandering around. Because, a lot of people who are cozy writers, they also write romance. And there's always that temptation of, should I write something else? Absolutely not. I don't even like romance in my real life. Like I said, I had a bit of online dating and I mostly turned it into murder conversations. I'm just here for the murder mysteries. So it is nice to have done the experimentation already and now be professionalizing that.
What about marketing? What do you wish you'd known about marketing?
I think I'm going to say the same thing I've said many times, but how much of it is mindset? So I've realized this year, one of the big things holding me back from successful marketing is self-belief. I think, and that's an author thing, right? Is you spend so much time writing by yourself alone in your room and kind of hoping somebody will one day be excited to look at the words you write. It's hard to transition from that to seamlessly go from that to investing money in Facebook ads and thinking if the Facebook ad doesn't work, it's because the ad doesn't work, rather than, oh, maybe my book is terrible. And that has just been a constant effort this year, is to really figure out a way to overcome that and to try and find ways to objectively feel confident in my own work enough to say that I know I've done everything I can. The books are as good as they can be, and there's an audience out there for them, and it is worth me investing the time and money to learn ads to make them sell. And that isn't about learning the ads platform. That is about overcoming the obstacles of lack of self-belief.
Yes. Something I think we all struggle with on so many different areas, not just advertising, but even setting up a newsletter list and collecting names when you begin, things like that too.
Or before you
and that's
begin.
interesting. I think I had not been forced to confront that as much because I have always had jobs that are sort of creative or like marketing adjacent. So I've done a lot of writing newsletters and I find it enjoyable and easy. And in fact, this year I've gone from monthly to weekly because I realize it's something that is easy for me and I can write a fun, interesting newsletter without it feeling like a lot of work in a way that I do not have that feeling with ads. Yeah, so I think I was able to kind of skate over that worry for a while because I leaned into areas where I'm comfortable.
Right.
And I I don't know if I could have realized it earlier. I think I could have done. I think I could have put more effort into thinking about the mindset side of things had I maybe even have had people talking about it more. I think people don't talk about it enough. There's a big kind of push to be presenting your most confident self online, and that's where most of us meet. And you know, if you're the person in the 20 books to 50k Facebook group saying, I think I'm not very good at writing, like you're not having an engaging conversation there. We're all trying to hide that side of ourselves because it's the part we're maybe most ashamed of. And I really wish that people talk about that more. And that's part of the reason why Sam and I set up this podcast to kind of come to that stage where you're less certain and you don't have the success to back yourself up.
That is so good. What assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
I think the biggest thing that definitely turned out to be wrong, that I had thought would be the easiest thing, was handling my own schedule.
Sorry, that's so funny.
Yeah, I know. But I'm single. I don't have kids. I, at the time, was living in Hong Kong, had a good job, very regular hours. I worked in education, but their education is a very respected career where you don't take work home. You just work the hours that you work, and then, you know, it worked very well with my writing schedule. So I really thought, and I've been writing for a long time before I started self-publishing. So I really thought, I know how much time I've got in my life. I know how much time I've got in my week. Here's how I can get the work done to get these books out. And I started with a really good plan to rapid release a series of cozies. And the first book came out in October of 2019. So that I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and they had big protests there right then. And I lived in the absolute epicenter of the protests. And outside my window every single night were riots and fires and riot police and a lot of noise. And so that was disruptive, but I felt like I can overcome this. So I was writing really, you know, hardworking. I even went to a hotel across the other side of the island to work there for a week just to kind of capture a schedule. So I got a book out in October. I got a book out in November. And then there was a pandemic, and I was no longer controlling my schedule. I changed, you know, I moved countries sort of without deciding to. It just happened. And then I was working from home. My schedule changed, just everything upended. And I think I'm young enough and have not got enough family ties to really have been forced to make those sorts of changes and accommodations before. And so I hadn't factored that in. And now I definitely think about that and plan around that. And even I have an autoimmune condition and I have to plan around that. And so I pad my schedule with extra weeks, because in an ideal world, I don't get sick. But in the real world in which I live, I get sick fairly often. And especially so if I push myself. So it was a useful lesson, not a lesson I would necessarily have wanted, but it was, again, a useful lesson to have at the beginning of my career when people aren't sat around waiting for my next book. But yeah, I'm definitely not in charge of my schedule. Even I'm just doing the best I can.
Right. The reason I laughed is because I think we all deal with that. I mean, that we think, and we overestimate what we're capable of. All of us. Every author I've ever met overestimates what they're capable of. Even if they're a one book a month kind of author, they really secretly think they can do 2 books a month, but they can't. I mean, you know, it's just crazy.
And we all have positivity when we're talking about what's coming in the future. We're all like, oh, I'm not going to get sick. I won't have any home repair issues. You know, everything will be fine. We don't plan for any disruptions at all. It's crazy.
2 weeks ago, somebody drove an 18-wheeler lorry into my house.
Oh my God.
A week from submission to my editor for my first book of miniseries. Yeah, it was fine. Nobody was hurt at all. I was locked in my house because they hit the door frame and it pushed the door frame shut. And then now it's just been tons and tons of admin. They're paying for it all. It's fine. But, you know, I have to get all the surveys to come and get all the quotes. Yeah, and you can't plan for that. I obviously didn't plan for a truck to come and drive into my house, and anything could happen at any time.
Yeah. So we need to build in extra time. We just need to. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had extra time built in my schedule. So I was absolutely fine when I had the truck crash. And that has felt like a little bit of a win. That's felt really nice to be able to overcome that.
Well, other than planning for trucks crashing into your house, any other important, maybe what's the most important lesson you've learned?
That you cannot do this alone. I am a very independent person. I think I am overly independent. So I have the idea of like independent author is something that we take too seriously. I'm an overly independent author, And this year I have finally started. And like I said, I had my friend Jordan Rivet that I worked with when I very first started. I had a nice voucher for my brother for a fancy afternoon tea. So I took her to afternoon tea and I sat down and had all the list of questions that I wanted to ask her. And in exchange for this very nice meal, she answered all my stupid questions. That was fantastic. But then I didn't learn from that and think I should keep doing this. And obviously we kept chatting, but we're at such different career stages that I didn't feel like I could, it felt like bugging her to ask her lots of questions, which I'm sure she wouldn't have thought it, but that's the independent mindset of a lot of people.
Yeah.
But this year I have started working with another sort of very, not a friend originally. So she's like the best friend from primary school of my best friend from high school, was also a self-published author in about a similar phase to me. And we, through the grapevine, found out about each other and each other's writing. And then when I moved back to the UK, we ended up living relatively near each other. And so we started meeting up once a week. And that has been a game changer. And since then, I've kind of, through the podcast that we do together, connected with other authors, joined like Discord groups of other similar authors, and feel like I'm now much more in a group of similar level people, rather than trying to find, where's the right advice amongst day one people and 7-figure authors.
Right. Yeah. Finding your contemporaries is just invaluable because they're struggling with the same things. And if they've, figured out a way to do a certain thing you're having trouble with, it's just invaluable to have those connections.
It really is.
Yeah. And I've been to the SPS Live conference in the UK a few times, and it's great that there's a conference near enough that I feel like I can go to. It's down in London, which is not super near me, but obviously near enough I can go for the few days it's on. And that again feels like a real game changer to meet other people who are at similar stages.
Because I will say that having friends who are farther along than you, or making more money than you, or more famous than you, or whatever, it's nice because they do have things they can offer, but it's not like it's going to change your career. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you can really ride coattails. You can gain information, but it's different because they're at different stages. They hit those stages at a different time in the industry than we're at. And so, yeah, I mean, it's nice to have them because they do provide some wisdom because they are farther ahead. But it's that those people that are in the trenches with you at your stage are the ones that really help, I think.
Yeah. And I think there's people that are also looking with hindsight. So they have maybe, erased from their memory the 10 things they tried that didn't go anywhere. And they're telling you, here's the one key to success, but it might not be your one key to success.
Exactly.
So that I think it's useful to have both types of friends. And I didn't really have a contemporary I could talk to on such a close level as I have done this year. And it has felt like an absolute, big mindset change.
Yeah. What's the biggest change you've made in your thinking?
I feel like this is going to be a controversial answer. It's that releasing more books isn't the answer. Like you see that everywhere. Like nothing sells the last book like the next book. And you see it so much, and it's such a simplified way of expressing it. It's sort of true, but it's not true the way that you might take it when you're beginning. And I joined Orna Ross's Go Creative program this year. And she's so wise about money, and she's such a clear business head. She runs Ally as well. So just a great resource of information. And she was saying, if you've got, a dozen books that aren't selling, the 13th book isn't the thing to make a difference. Go back and work on your business. Yeah. And so that's why I took most of this year off. I felt like I was on a hamster wheel of just like, maybe this book will be correct. I'll just write another book. And I have a job. So it's a big time sacrifice to just keep putting books out that aren't going anywhere, and they were, paying for themselves, but that's not enough. That's not where I want to be. So taking a big chunk of time off to really think about a new series, think about my business. There aren't thousands of people sat around waiting for my next book. So there's no cost to it. And I would rather take the time now at the start of my business to get things right and not feel like I'm on a hamster wheel, just churning books out without understanding enough.
I think that's like an advanced maneuver, is to figure out, okay, this is not working. Let me take a step back and reassess. In doing that, Are you thinking or seeing anything that you would do differently if you started over today? Because we have some new authors that listen. So is there any advice you would give them?
I think thinking about in terms of book releases, I think I would have thought more about, and partly I got into cozies by accident, right? I just started writing a book that someone said, this is just like a cozy. And I happened to have read enough things that were cozy-ish and seen enough things that were cozy-ish to know it. But then I very quickly pivoted because my first series is quite long, the books for cozies. And so then I thought, I know the market, it's for shorter books. So I'll write a series of shorter books. And that was the only thing I thought through, was like, make them shorter. And actually they don't really fit the mold. And while they were shorter, they still retain some of the quality of a longer book. So they were a little bit slow to get into, rather than feeling like they're kind of an immediate thing for a cozy. So I definitely wish I had taken more time to, if I wanted to treat it more business-like, really look at some sample books and just write down and like make myself a very clear list of saying, you have to do these things, otherwise you're wasting your time. And you can do those things in however you want, but you can't skip these functions, and just write a shorter book. That isn't the answer.
Well, what would you say the sweet spot is though for cozy books as far as word count?
Definitely varies. So that's something that I found really tricky. Some people who have been in the genre for a while, they get away with writing longer books. So if you look at like H.Y. Hannah, her books are probably closest in terms of like style to mine, but she writes really long books, and I think that's not the norm. So if you look at like the other contemporary or the other kind of comp book that I would look at is like Agatha Frost, there can be really, really short, like, below 40,000.
Oh, wow.
And some slightly longer. But there's the trick to that is like making them still feel like a full book, because people want the quickness of a mystery. Like they want to be able to read it in one sitting and kind of devour a mystery, but not have it just feel light and fluffy. They want to have lots of characters and lots of setting. And that is a real skill. That is something that it's taken a while to figure out.
Don't you think maybe 50 to 70K is kind of the sweet spot? Maybe 70K is getting a little long, but
yeah.
I
think having a series where, so Agatha Christie's books are like 45 to 55, really, really short. So it's doesn't feel as short as you would think when you're reading it, because it's such a singular focus in a mystery. You're really just looking at one thing. So I think my new series, I was originally trying to target around 42. And in fact, my first book has come in shorter than that, which feels so short. But actually, when I read it, it's got everything in my longer books do. It's just done in a tighter way, which I think I'm happy with, and I want to see how that does.
Well, tell us about your podcast, Pen to Paycheck. How did it come to be, and who is it for?
So I am a big fan of podcasts. I am not normally an early adopter. Like, I only got a smartphone a few years ago, and I was listening to podcasts before then. I had like a tablet I would lug around to listen to podcasts on. I do a lot of walking. I don't have a car, so I do a lot of walking, and I love to feel like I'm learning something all the time and listen to people. And it was there was such a great resource when I was learning about self-publishing. Just having all the knowledge you could possibly want is definitely out there. It's out there in podcast form. You just have to find it.
It is.
Yeah. And the ones that I definitely gravitated towards were things like this podcast, like next level authors, like sci-fi fantasy and six-figure authors. I love the ones where it's people talking about their own career. And even just like what's happened this week to us, that feels like such a valuable insight. But they're all from people who are looking with hindsight at they're now at a measure of success, that they have said, now I am someone who can be a voice in the industry, and I feel confident enough to put a podcast out and talk about these things from a sense of having succeeded. And you can talk about things that haven't, gone well, but a lot of things to do with early career, they're at a different time in history, or you're looking at it with hindsight. So I've that's something I've been thinking about for a while. And then a book that I was reading through, I can't remember what it is. It's maybe Right to Riches, but one of many, many mindset books I've read this year was saying, look at all your favorite people, like who you most admire, who you gravitate towards, and how do they make their money and how do they make their business work. And I was writing down people like Joanna Penn. Like, I think she's a similar person to me in like mindset. And I think I've said that word a million times, but it's my word of the year, I think. Yeah, just in terms of the way she thinks about things and, even subjects she's interested in. So someone like that. And I found like a few people like that. And the thing they often had in common was they have podcasts. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about that at the same time as I sort of post-pandemic was trying to find a writing community and met up with this friend of a friend, Sam. And we were planning originally like, oh, should we maybe meet up once a month together and just try and have sort of like mastermind days where we sit down and we look at each other's stats and we discuss anything and everything with a really open, frank, no holds barred way. And then just an offhand comment, because I felt empowered by this list I just made, I said in a very quiet voice, I really want to have a podcast. And she said, I really want to have a podcast too. and we found out we both have the exact same podcasting mic. So we're like, that is the universe saying,
is it a sign?
I already have this. Yeah, I already have this for work because I record audiobooks sometimes for work. So yeah, it felt like absolutely that is great. And in fact, we would love everyone to have a podcast, which sounds extreme, but it's not that expensive to do if you're doing it on a small scale and you can control the costs. Like you can put up whatever quality you want. For podcasts like this, like a talking head podcast, it doesn't have to be the best quality. It just has to be a conversation that people is a good enough quality to listen to.
We are living proof of that.
But yeah, so I think it's a huge, huge benefit because I really want to hear about people on their journey rather than reflecting back or just reflecting back. Like I think there's benefit to both. And our kind of tagline in the introduction is like our mastery through missteps journey. I think it is useful to share ups and downs, and we both share our moods each week as well. So we talk about our wins and whinges of the week, and it's really helpful to reflect on, I feel like I can't do anything this week and there's no real reason. Like nothing has changed about my career, nothing has changed about my books. I just feel deflated. And it's nice to have that check-in point and say, that is just a feeling right now. And also we set kind of short series of 4 episodes on a certain topic. So, and it'll be whatever we're focusing on at the moment. So for example, next year we're doing a little series on finance because we really want to kind of make some commitments with our money and put budget in place rather than just sneaking out money when we don't notice it and put that into ads because you don't have to think about it. And so we put those series together and it makes us do it, right? It's such an accountability tool because otherwise you could just say, I'll put money in ads later and never get
someday.
That's where I've been so far. Is I was waiting for the 3rd book and then it was a pandemic. I was like, well, maybe I'll wait for the 4th book. And then my 4th book was a bit of an odd one. It was a short story collection. Like, I'll wait for the 5th book. And then I need to recover the books. And there's always a reason to do it. Whereas if you've got a podcast where you've said, next week I would have set up some ads, you have to come on and tell somebody either I did it, I didn't like it, but I did it, or I'm a terrible person who's failed on my promise. So it's just
that's accountability. Yes, the accountability probably
it does force you to face this. When you say the same things to yourself over and over again, you don't always notice. You can let it slide. But when you say the same things over and over again to another person, they notice and they say, you said this 10 times this year. You need to figure out how to sort that. So yeah, I think everyone should be doing it. Anyone who wants to know about podcasting, like look us up on Instagram. It's Pen to Paycheck Authors Podcast. We will answer any questions about podcasting because we are genuinely advocating for everybody to set up a similar sort of like follow your journey podcast. I would love to listen to all of them.
We've had some feedback in the past that people love the big success stories, but they also really like the new author stories because you need that perspective as well. Because like you said, things have changed. So I think that's a great place to be. Like you're filling a gap in the market almost. I don't know that you intentionally set out to do that, but I think there is a need for that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a gap. Like I would love to listen to more podcasts like that. So if anyone can even recommend other things like ours, I would love to hear it. It's difficult to do. I think it's really difficult to talk about something at which you are not successful. That's not really the way that our culture is set up. And to talk frankly about, I just got in my own way this week. I had a bad week emotionally and I didn't do the things that I knew I could have done. And to say that openly is difficult, but it feels like I would love to hear someone else say that. And so I want to be honest about it. And, you know, we've got no intention to stop this. So we're hoping that, you know, if someone starts in year 3, when we're on the podcast in year 3 and we are wildly successful, we can say like, go back and listen from episode 1 and you will see how we got here. And it is not smooth sailing.
Yeah, that's the truth. Well, I want to circle back to cozies for just a little bit and talk about titles, because I saw your titles and they're so clever. And so titles are so important in cozies. They have to be kind of funny and punny as well. So how do you come up with your titles?
Yeah.
So
first tell us your titles.
Tell us a couple of your titles.
Yeah. Or tell the listeners. Yeah.
So I have got 3 different series and they all have 3 different title schemes. So one series is it's set in the countryside, in the UK countryside. So I wanted them all to have rurally sounding titles. So book 1 in that is The Slay of the Land. Book 2 is Dying Over Spilled Milk. Book 3 is Fresh Out of Clock. So they're all countryside-y. Another series is set in the equivalent of a diner in the UK. It's called A Greasy Spoon. And they're all food related. So there's things like In Deep Truffle in that one. And again, they all have to talk to danger or crimes in some way, but also be a pun and be food. And then my new series is set in a book town, a bit like Hay on Wye, if you're familiar with that in the UK. But it's by someone who runs a tea room in that town. So I wanted them to be book titles that are murdery and also relate to baking. I really made a rod for my own back here. But the first title for that one is And Then There Were Scones. Next up is Lime and Punishment. And then the one after that is going to be The Catcher in the Pie.
So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. Yeah, I really love the titles. And I love the cover designers who kind of bring them to life and make them look fantastic. How I come up with them, I can take almost no credit for any of them. So I have a best friend from university who somehow this is her skill. Like this is her equivalent of being able to write a novel is when I was looking for that book 3 title for my first series, Fresh Out of Clock, for very convoluted reasons, I got a cover that had chickens on the cover because it was a last minute thing I needed. And so I had to write a book about chickens or featuring chickens in some way. And it was, it fits together. There's a picture of chickens and some real chickens in the book. It's the countryside. But I was saying to her, like, I can't even think of a title. I should not have picked this topic. Can you think of anything? And she came up with 3 titles. We were just like in our friend's house, hanging out, chatting. 3 titles within a minute. Like this is her superpower. And I don't know how she does it, but it is amazing. So
can we hire her? Yeah.
I think how is this not a career? It should be. So she is my first port of call. And sometimes, the subject isn't one she can think of something on, or she's got some right things and she'll keep mulling it over and she'll send me a few back. And then I'll often send them out to people. And I've got a few different friendship groups who are keen to contribute, not necessarily successfully, but they're keen to about the process. And that's always nice to chat to people about it rather than sit alone in your room and think, what's a pun on the word murder? And then also, Googling book titles with murder in, and there's a website called like phrase.org or something where I've looked at like set phrases with countryside words in. That's how I like The Slay of the Land, Dying Over Spilled Milk, things like that is also helpful to look there. AI sometimes is like helpful in terms of suggesting things that are a medium good start, and then you can work from there. But yeah, I think about them a long time in advance. And I've got my book titles for this new series, The Parchment Paper Mysteries, which I didn't think of the title of that series either. That was Sam if at the podcast. I think it's a great series title, but I can't take any credit for it. So The Parchment Paper Mysteries, I've got the first 7 titles because I feel so paranoid about not having them because I can't think of them myself. So I have to really like collect them like a magpie. But it's a fun part of the process, and it does make me feel like it's, that's a thing I'm definitely nailing in terms of cozies is the titles. So even on a bad day when I'm not feeling very confident, I'm like, I've got great titles and really nice covers. I'm not responsible for them, but I collected them.
Well, it is interesting when you really look at them, because I think people who don't read cozies go, oh, just a silly little title, silly. And I think it's like fluffy and not.
Yeah.
And the titles, when you really look at how you are matching them to the book and the tone of the genre, they are pretty complex. And then you've got to have the pun in there as well. So kudos.
Yeah, I think I wish I hadn't started in sometimes that I'm having a bad day, because it's like trying to fit the theme and a murdery word and then a pun. It's a lot to try and fit in. And I do think one day I'll just run out. But not yet. For a long time. Yeah, I know. Like I always really admire like Ellie Alexander's titles. Yeah. She's got such funny titles, and she's again like a comp in terms of style. So I really wanted to stick with that if possible. And it is hard work, but very satisfying when you come up with the right one.
I agree. That's very true. Well, I also wanted to ask too about your Heathervale Herald, that it's a reader magnet, right? Could you tell a little bit about how that came up and why it's different from maybe somebody giving away like a prequel type reader magnet?
So when I started, I had all my great intentions and I got a prequel before I started. In fact, I started my newsletter and gave my prequel out before book 1 of the Heathervale Mysteries. That's my first series. And that was fantastic. Like, I would 100% recommend that to anybody, is have a reader base before you release book 1, because it is encouraging to have pre-orders on a book. It's discouraging to have like nothing. So that felt great. And I think I've given away like 10,000 copies now of that prequel just on BookFunnel. So fantastic. But it's a specific sort of reader magnet, right? It's a cold reader magnet. You can read it if you're a warm reader. It's a prequel, so you can go back and read it, but it's not as compelling to a warm reader as a cold reader. So I wanted something else that would engage people and would also make me stand out enough. So the Heathervale Herald is a fake newspaper for the village of Heathervale, where my first series is set. And it's got all sorts of things in there that I find easy to write. So that it kind of came out of one of the many, many mindset books I've read, is the Big Leap, that is about the genius zone from Gay Hendricks, about like, what are the things that you think are really easy and just like you could do as easy as breathing, but everyone else thinks is very difficult. Like my friend being able to come up with cozy titles. She's not aware this is a life skill that everyone else would kill for. But I find it very easy to write newsletters, newspapers, things like that. I've had a lot of experience and I find it easy to put those together. So I thought I'll make one. It wasn't easy in terms of quick and easy, but it was easy in terms of I knew what to include and all I had to do was put it together. And it's got things in there like little snippets of advice from different side characters. It's got a short story, so a side quest from other characters that happens in the middle of book 1. And it's got a recipe that is from something in the book. It's got an apology from a character, like an article they wrote, this an apology for something they did in the book. So it kind of gives you a bit of closure on that. So it's got lots and lots of different parts. It was easy to conceive of for me. And as a warm lead, I think it is very effective. I was surprised that when I sent it out to my newsletter, it didn't get lots of downloads. Got some, but not lots. And I think actually those people, the reason is they read book 1 ages ago. Like it came out in 2019. It's not top of their mind, but it's now in the back of book 1 and it's in the box set. And I'm just getting steady downloads on that. So I think it does work as a warm lead. If anybody wants to have a look at it, drop me a message on Instagram for the best way to get in touch. Matilda Swift author, and I'll happily send you a copy. It is available on Funnel and I can share that. And it was a lot of fun. Just made it in Canva. Again, I love Canva. I recently went up to Canva Pro. This is obviously not an ad, but I could not live without it now.
Well, I think it's really a unique idea, and it's really nice for cozies readers because it will appeal to cozy readers. I think it's a good match.
Yeah, and I just did it for book 1 of my first series, just to kind of test the ground and see whether it was effective, because it is more work than just writing the story. You've got to format it and think of the other bits to put together, and then get all the links in place. There's various bits to it. And I tested out also recording the short story and sending that as an audio recording to my newsletter. I think that was more work than it needed to be. And I won't continue with that. But I think I'm going to continue with making the newspapers, especially because they've got things like that I would do anyway, like a short story, like a recipe. I would do those as, for my newsletter anyway. And it's just a way of putting that together. So definitely something I'm going to continue with, and I would recommend it. And just kind of thinking a bit outside the box for cozy readers.
I think it's a great idea.
I love it. I was thinking even like if you had a character that had a blog, or if you had, just a little gossip column or gossip sheet or something like that. Yeah, that's a
even
great...
letters, right? Like, or emails.
Or letters,
we could be doing that are not just short stories.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I had looked for a while at doing bonus epilogues. Obviously, they're huge in romance. So I read a few and I just thought, I couldn't find a way to make it work in a mystery because people want a mystery. So my short story had to be a mystery, and I couldn't find a way to make it like short and interesting. So I just thought, if I'm going to be longer, I might as well go all in on something a bit different.
And they want the mystery wrapped up.
Yeah.
They don't want it hanging out there. Yeah, exactly. Well, I love that. I love that idea. That is so great. Well, it's been great having you. And we love to ask all of our guests, what do you think the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success has been?
I would say, the podcast. It sounds an extreme thing to say, start a podcast, but you don't have to go that far. You could just have a weekly meeting with a friend at your level.
Right.
That feels like I can't conceive of stopping that. And it feels like a thing that is providing everything I need at this stage of my career. I'm in so many other different groups, but they don't have that close touch where I can just say to somebody, I don't know what I'm doing this week. I've got no ideas of what I'm doing with this ad. Can you take a look at this? Like Sam, who hosts it with me, she will reply to like any messages about, we share each other's ad copy, we share graphics, we talk about highs and lows of how we're feeling. We share books. It's the relationship that I needed. It's like a work wife in what is quite a lonely business.
Yes. I have a work wife too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Works
and
out great.
actually, when Sarah and I met, the first time we met, we talked about wanting to do a podcast. We just didn't think we knew enough to do one yet, but we always knew we wanted to do one.
If it's meant to be, it just works out, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, where can people find out more about you and your books and the podcast? So
my newsletter, if you want to sign up for that, I've gone weekly and I am using a really nice regular format so that you can sign up to that on my website, matildaswift.com, or I'm on Instagram at Matilda Swift Author and really everywhere else. And the podcast is everywhere at Pen to Paycheck Authors. So listen to that. It should be on all platforms. If it's not on your platform, let us know because we have worked very hard to get it everywhere. But we're most likely to be on Instagram, both me and the podcast.
Okay, well, we will have all those links in the show notes, and you can find those at wishidknownforwriters.com. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to that same link /support. So thanks for being here, and we will see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.